I was listening to an old radio show, and it was from like 1996 or so. 96, 90, no, probably a little later, like 1998. Just as like the internet was starting to have websites and search engines, and they were talking about search engines, not even Google back then. They were talking about like Yahoo. And anyway, they were talking about how, in 10 years you'll be able to go to a Chinese website and read Chinese poetry translated into perfect English. And I thought, and now it's 2000, almost 20 years since then. They were talking about 10 years, and still you go to a Chinese website and read it. And it's still, it's closer perhaps.
Yeah. But
the idea of, in the future, all this is going to be just the way we want it.
Yeah.
It doesn't ever quite.
You better be laughing when you think that thought. And you better not stop laughing.
It never quite happens that way, or... Well, anyway, it's just an example. I just had to laugh because they were so in awe of the internet back then and how it was going to change everything for the better, and how it's going to bring this whole new brotherly love to the world. Because now we can communicate and interact, and our economies are going to be joined together.
But it is interesting how all of these connecting apps and technologies, and people are thinking the same old shit, slinging the same old shit.
Yeah,
and nothing changes. Well, nothing can change. Well, the ground of being for use, the things are being used in the same historical way. It's not going to.
Yeah, technology is just always going to be an expression of what's driving it. Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
There's this friend of mine who owns Edgar's, the guy Ben Benedetto. There's an Italian saying that he said it's like, if you're not laughing, then you are not a serious man. That's the English translation.
Yeah.
And he said to me, do you know what that means? I said, well, I have an idea, I thought about it. I wasn't sure if he was somehow trying to figure out it, I'm not quite sure what that means. I said, it's pretty simple. Laughter's your only hope.
Right, yeah. Because none of this can be taken seriously. And you can't rely on any of it.
Laughter for its own sheer sake of escape, really, as a direct route out of the linear mentality, is, without that, nothing can really be understood. Mm-hmm. Nothing can be enjoyed. And even if the initial provocation for doing it or thinking it is enjoyment, it's quickly going to become some mundane episode, some repeat performance of something. It's either not quite the way it was the last time you did it, or it doesn't taste the same, or your mind's going to twist it in some way. Mm-hmm. So laughter and humor as a ground of being is really a vast opening for greater possibility. Mm-hmm. If it's not, based on the temporal and the mundane, mm-hmm. and, all of the more traditional mundane uses of comedy, which are pretty much not funny.
Yeah.
Even if you get a chuckle out of it initially,
Mm-hmm. Laughter also, laughter indicates that, to laugh, you have to be relaxed about what you're experiencing, It's because laughter itself, it can be a symptom of anxiety, I guess it could be. But really relaxed laughing and enjoying, it's like you're at ease with yourself and with the other. And
I think
it points to that, what you're opening to there.
Yeah, and the idea of relaxing is really a key component in that initial movement or shift into whatever it is you're going to do. I mean, if you're not relaxed about it, it's going to get pretty stiff pretty fast.
It's amazing how that keeps reappearing in my life. Like, this is difficult. Why is it difficult? I'm not relaxed.
Yeah.
It's so simple.
Yeah,
and what it means to be relaxed has become deeper and deeper, and what it means to be natural.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
But if I start with that idea and hold myself open and responsible for the idea of wanting to go in that direction, something happens that does indicate that there's certainly is a greater possibility that has to do with comfort and being at rest, and relaxed. And that's a key component in enjoying anything.
Definitely.
So, I'm finding out that in my weekly gig at Edgar's, my Friday and Saturday night thing, and it's an interesting thing. If you just keep doing it, I think something like that, which really affords that kind of greater opportunity, because essentially you're doing it in the spirit of connection and communication. Mm-hmm. Right? You're not alone in your living room. You're kind of in a place and other people are hearing you, and usually there's people who haven't heard you before. Mm-hmm. And so it brings that factor, that quality of what's beyond the whole veil of separation and loneliness and all of the stressors and the difficulty associated with being in my little bubble. Mm-hmm. So, I find that each week something happens that's indicative of a greater learning experience, of a deeper reservoir of possibility for self-expression, musical expression.
That's good.
Yeah, it is good, and all I really need to do is just keep showing up. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a part of me that always wants to quit. Mm. Stop playing the song. Is the set over yet? All right, I've done this enough. I had 4 weekends or whatever. Maybe it's time to take a break. But there really is that thing about just keep on returning to it. About anything that's of worth and it's of value, because my mind will fool me and portray or frame the experience as undesirable or unwanted, hopeless in some way, quickly. Mm-hmm. And for me, usually that happens, the instant I think of doing the thing, So it's really interesting to see that just showing up, just picking up the book, just doing the lesson again, there is evidence of movement and of a greater transaction that's happening. Mm-hmm. That is of an intelligence that's really beyond my own making and my own understanding. And that's when things soften up and get good. That's when something happens that's different than the way I always do it. Mm-hmm. When all of a sudden you find yourself, or I find myself in that space of, I'm no longer doing it, but something is happening that's motivating it, or guiding it, or holding it up, or feeding it, nourishing it. Something inexplicable, something beyond my comprehension, something that feels completely alien and different to all of my references. This thing about life and about love and about loving intelligence and about presence and reality this fundamental principle that's always here, that's beyond my thoughts about it, the concept in which I refer to it and frame it, which is all limiting. It's all my ongoing attempt to keep control and limiting order in my world, in my personal experience. But it's only when, by the greater grace, I get past that, that I begin to feel alive again and begin to have a sense of, oh yes, this is familiar to me, but completely beyond my sense of understanding or my idea of what's actually happening. And that's, laughter in and of itself doesn't get you there, but laughter approached from that direction, from that guidance, from that hope or desire or possibility, that longing for an experience outside of what I predetermined, is really the only way to go, and the prerequisite that brings a far more expansive and higher order and quality of experience to everything. Most of us, or I should say that one of the defenses against that kind, the controlling defenses against that kind of experience, is fatigue or becoming bored with it or getting tired, in the midst of that kind of thing. And I see it happens frequently to people in the group, very often, because once the experience or the communication begins to move out of the realm of what I expected or what I think should be happening, then it gets a little weird. You know what I mean? It triggers the minds, the egos, the worldly minds' natural defenses, which are of course unnatural to me or to anything alive. But those defenses get triggered, and the responses are, well, how can I make this go away? How can I bring this back to a place that I understand? And that will happen until we reach a stage in our experience where we realize that my understanding is really not necessary, and in fact is generally problematic, right? So that I can get comfortable with not knowing what I'm up to, not knowing what to do, and not knowing what to say, and not knowing what's supposed to happen, and yet hanging in there, being in the experience for all that might happen, knowing at some level, no matter how dimly I might be aware of it, that anything and everything can happen, that it could really be worthwhile, whatever this is. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of excuse making for people, for me too, and for everybody, obviously, the idea of, well, I don't like this, and that's the reason why my mind is closed. As if my liking it or not liking it has anything to do with me having an open mind.
Right. I've yet to really discover that, I don't even know what it is. How could I like it or dislike it? What is the thing in me that likes it or dislikes it?
Right, yeah. I mean,
and how essential is that?
Yeah. With my girlfriend, who I was dating, she was really into this one musician, and he was a great musician. I mean, the guy's awesome. I mean, He's a fantastic musician. He just didn't really like the music.
Yeah.
But it was hard for me to explain that to her. Like, it's not really to my liking, but obviously the guy's brilliant. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
My liking it or dislike it is irrelevant.
Yeah, I was like,
to the validity of what it is.
I said, yeah, it's not. I don't expect you to like some of the stuff I like. I mean, some of the stuff I like, I know you're not going to like, and that's okay. But I still like it. You know, and it doesn't mean it's less valid. It's hard for people to hear a criticism and understand that.
Yes.
That doesn't mean, it doesn't mean I don't still appreciate you. They connect it to, I guess a lot of people connect criticism to guilt. Like if I don't like somebody, then I'm trying to tear them. In their mind, maybe they think I'm trying to tear them down, but it's not that at all. It's just.
But that would be a typical response from that aspect of the separate self-concept that's rooted in wrongness. Something wrong.
There's something wrong.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with you not liking this.
Exactly.
But there isn't.
Yeah. No, my liking it or disliking it is irrelevant. I mean, it says everything about my conditioning and has absolutely nothing to do with the validity of who you are and what you're doing. Very often artists become consequentially misunderstood because as an artist becomes more imbued and under the influence, as an artist comes under that influence, they become less involved in all of the social niceties of trying to please someone or trying to please a crowd or make something that might be popular. And that's when generally the best work becomes possible because they're operating from a sense of artistic validity that is boundless. Mm-hmm. And is not at all caught up in the social niceties that are really aspects of fearful conformity.
Sure.
Of just trying to maintain.
Right.
Trying to exist, trying to get over.
Yeah.
Do you like that? Do you like me? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with being liked and appreciated and all of those things. Those are aspects of the human experience that have a place. Mm-hmm. But they by no means should direct our lives and misdirect us or deprive us of that far richer, more nourishing and expansive experience of knowing who we are, out of which we know who the other is, out of which we can actually share an encounter that does us both a whole lot of good. Mm-hmm. Something unusual, something that's beyond I like it or I don't like it. Mm-hmm. So it's only as we become naturally drawn to the unconditional, as we become more or less comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's usually the first stage, The first stage of really learning anything new is realizing I don't know how to do the damn thing. I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. I feel awkward. I feel clumsy. And then becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable so as to get to that most cherished and essential ground of being called being comfortable, being at rest, being at peace, having an experience of I'm okay, I'm safe. I don't have a problem with the fact that I can do it or cannot do it, or I have thoughts that it's not good enough what I'm doing, really don't matter. As we become more at ease with each other, we drop all of the baggage. We drop all the baggage is the conditions. All the stuff that I learned, when I think I learned it. You know, I mean, ultimately we discover in a miracle-minded experience of communication, what we discover is the only thing you can really learn is what is reality, truth, the fundamentals of creation and creativity. You really can't, all the conditional stuff we seem to have taken on, we just seem to have taken that on. None of that really happened, right? Remember, the Course in Miracles is rooted and based on the idea that you can be of good cheer because none of this ever happened. Didn't happen. All that stuff you worry about, or I worry about, or I like, or I don't like, that's, you know, where I feel tension and conflict. I don't have to be tense about any of it because I never really learned any of that. None of that is true.
But sometimes it feels so real.
Well, yeah, it will always reflect back to me the reality that I give it, right? Because fundamentally what we learn as we go along the guidelines in the direction of an enlightening curriculum is that I have free will. And that I'm never experiencing anything other than what I choose. But I'm not aware that I chose it. Doesn't matter. All I need to do is become aware of what I chose as the first step towards unraveling the mystery of that influence and letting it go, releasing it, forgiving it. Yes?
So
I'm sorry. No, please.
So what is, how we discover what we chose?
Well,
just looking at our reality?
The first thing is you become aware that maybe you become aware of a thought. You become aware of a feeling I'm having. Very often we're not aware of our thoughts.
We also don't question our thoughts or our feelings.
That our thoughts are...
We often don't.
Oh, no.
We don't question them.
No, exactly.
We assume, well, of course I'm nervous because this situation calls for nervousness. Everybody would be nervous, right?
Right.
It's like, no, actually, not everybody would be nervous.
Yeah, and
so there's
and you don't have to be. I don't have to be nervous either.
But I feel nervous.
Yes. So that process of becoming conscious and aware is one at which we begin to become present and aware of what I'm feeling. And then the relationship, it could be simultaneously or after the other, the relationship between feeling and thought, emotion and thought, where we become aware of our thoughts. And remember that feelings are thoughts. Thoughts lead to feelings. They're a denser form of thought. Mm-hmm. As we gain momentum in the curriculum of freedom, the curriculum of creative thought, of unconditional abstract expression, we gain the ability to recognize our thinking before it registers as a thought or as a feeling or an emotion. I don't have to have a heart attack or a dragged down dogfight with someone because I was not aware that I'm upset, I'm frustrated. My thoughts, I've been thinking poorly. Right? You could become so aware and directed, consciously directed, and willing as God wills, that your mind is just always gravitating towards the answer, the solution, the peace, the freedom, the forgiveness, the letting go, the miracle of life, of love. I am the expression of God's love, rather than allowing your mind to descend into those pockets of unreasonable difficulty, which is what happens when you're not watching your mind, when you're not awake. The whole principle of the Course in Miracles of a miracle is to awaken you. And all awakening is becoming aware, becoming present, feeling what I'm feeling, being aware of what I'm thinking.
And then deliberately change it.
Well,
Or how we
if that is your will, right? Yes.
If I don't like my reality, if there's some element of suffering, I need to do something. What do I do?
Right. Well, what you might do is one of the aspects of a transformational, healing, forgiving encounter experience that you're having is you might begin to realize that I like or I don't like my reality is an afterthought. It's what I am adding to the experience. That beyond my liking or not liking my reality is a perfectly acceptable, beautiful, wondrous, creative, infinitely attractive and appealing, beautiful reality. Right? The whole Course in Miracles is rooted in the idea that you're as God created you. There's what's not to like? What's not to love about the who you are, the self you are? What's not to love about that? Because if you stay at the level of I like or I don't like, then you could spend a lot of time chasing fixes that don't fix anything. Right? You could spend a lot of time trying to fix a perfectly good, I don't know, basketball or something, and that rolls perfectly. There's nothing wrong with the basketball. You don't have to change the writing on the basketball.
With my students in guitars.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with my guitar.
3 months later, I got to get a better guitar because it doesn't quite. I'm like, your guitar's fine.
I don't sound like you.
Yeah, it's like the guitar.
No, you're not going to use me to invalidate yourself.
I've often thought about selling guitars to people and say, this will be the one.
Yeah, well,
this will be the end of your search. This guitar.
Well, this is how the world works. This is what makes the world go round. Is we're selling a bill of goods that can't possibly work.
That's right.
But for a little while, we seem to be able to make some hay with it. We can make a little money. We can make a living.
Yeah.
Right. That's what advertising is all about.
Yeah.
That's what everything in the world is really about the idea or the promise that
your life could be better.
You could be better. Your life could be better, right? See, your life can't be better because God created it whole and perfect. And the reality of your life bears no resemblance whatsoever to the life you think yourself to be living, which is a caricature of your life, not having anything to do with your life at all. Gus, you want to come up? Gus, come on. Come on, boy. Come on. Gus.
He's a cat. Give him some time. Cats are never in a rush. That's what I love about cats. They're never frantic.
Well, that's true. I guess most of the time that's true. Come on, boy. Or you want to come over here? Which way is it going to be? Gosh, I think he wants to sit next to you. Do you mind?
No.
I don't know. We'll see where he wants to go. Here we go. Come on, boy. So, at every moment and in every situation and circumstance, there really isn't anything wrong, even though I'm rarely aware of that.
Can we take an example and just sort of go through it a little bit?
Sure.
All right, let's say I meet somebody and I instantly take a disliking to them.
Yes.
They say something and I don't like what they said, and therefore I think of them as being rude or
something
pretentious or whatever it is.
Something wrong over there.
There's something wrong with that person.
Yeah.
And those thoughts tighten up my body.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of that because I'm occupied with my thoughts about that person. I'm not having a good time now at this get-together, whatever it is, this party. And I can go home thinking, well, that party was terrible and because this happened. So with the Course, if I'm studying the Course and I meet somebody and it seems like they said something that offends me, I could actually stop for a second and say, all right, well, that person said that, but that doesn't mean it has to hurt me. I mean, it's just, whatever. Maybe they're having a bad day, or I don't know, but I don't want to feel offended because it hurts me.
Yeah. The
And then
ultimately the healing direction curriculum would require that you locate the scene of the crime. And the scene of the crime would always be you're taking exception to yourself. Right? Even though that's rarely ever recognized.
Taking exception to myself.
Yeah, you are offending yourself. You've already offended yourself.
I'm saying that what he said, it's true. It really hurts me. And I'm actually hurting myself.
But that's all after the fact. The starting point, the contention began with a decision against yourself, an attack on yourself.
Right.
Although that's almost never recognized.
So if I didn't feel like I was looking for, if I didn't feel hurt already, I wouldn't be looking for attacks.
What's not to love?
Right. I see.
Like the way you described with your girlfriend's, the musician she admired and liked.
Yeah.
It was not to your liking, but that in no way diminished your sense of appreciation for his or her validity as an artist.
Right.
Their self-expression. The fact that you don't like a style of music doesn't mean that the style of music is not valid or worthy.
Right.
Or being performed at a very high level.
And that goes for human beings.
It goes across the board of
everything.
Anything and everything in the entirety of the human experience. Right. So when you're all right, it's like that old American song, when you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you. Mm-hmm. When you're at home, when you're in synchronistic harmony, loving communication with yourself, you're naturally and simultaneously resonating with the other, whether you like their art, their body odor,
right,
their look, whether your mind is saying, well, they're too thin, or they're too heavy, or geez, I wonder why she didn't dress up more, or all that stuff we think. See, all that stuff is only what I think. It's not a problem unless I forget who I am. Mm-hmm. Once I forget who I am, then all of that stuff becomes slings and arrows that are being waged against my own valid life. They're attacks on the sanctity, the credibility, the beauty, the dignity, the meaning, the integrity of what I am and who I am as a creative entity, as a holy Son of God. See, once you make the connection with holy self, holy Son, with oneness with Father, then you're no longer in the field of being concerned with what you think. You're aware of your thoughts, but now, I wrote about it this week, you now have spiritual oversight. Mm-hmm. You have light to peer into the darkness of your own dim view of things, mundane view of things, historical, habitual, obsessive, compulsive, addictive view of things, but are no longer at the effect of that habitual, obsessive, compulsive addiction. It's just, it's like Werner Erhard used to say it this way. He is a wonderful teacher for me. And years ago, in these trainings that he used to do, these workshops, he used to say, so what? I mean, these people would go through these long, painful orations of why they're so tortured and tormented and why their life is in a shambles. And he would very patiently listen and work through these things with them, all leading to that moment where he could introduce the idea of, so what? You're not special. Everybody who enters into this situation's got one of those, or thinks they have one of those, and is going through some version, some similar version of that tragic, distracted, bitter, depressing experience. Everyone is suffering. Everyone who comes here is suffering. Jesus says in the Course, who else would come here but a patient? You'd have to be nuts to come here, right? So he would then introduce the idea at some point when he felt it was ready, so what? You know? You have to get out of the business of making yourself special for feeling that way, for having those thoughts and memories, because until you do, that is going to be the directing, dictating force in your life, and it will dog you till the day you depart. Mm-hmm. And the way he would talk about it, he would say, once you get that all that stuff is just, so what? You had a bad day. So what? Your mother did that, your father did that, your father died, your mother died, your father was an alcoholic, you were raped by your uncle. You know, once you get, oh, actually, I have it a little backwards. The first idea he would introduce is, it's just what's so. What's so? In other words, stop seeing it as this terrible thing that happened to me, this tragic, unforgivable thing that happened to me. Stop seeing it. Start seeing it as it's just what is so. It's just what's so in your life. Or from a Course principle, you would say, or we might say that it's what seems to be so. Mm-hmm. And then he would introduce the idea, the turnaround, which was, and if you can get it's what's so, then it shouldn't be a stretch for you to see, so what? It doesn't make you anything. It doesn't make you less than. It doesn't make you better than. Everybody's got one of those. Mm-hmm. So the first insight was, it's just what's so. It's not good or bad, right? The Buddhists have traditionally made the point that, you know, it's impossible to know in human evaluative thinking what's good or bad. Mm-hmm. It's hard, you know, the line I like is, it's hard to know what's good or bad. Because
it just is.
It just is. Or in Course terms, we could say it's what seems to be. Because nothing that I see in this world, from this window, from these eyes, from this mind, is real. Nothing. It's all a projection of my own mind. And all the while I am having and under the influence of an experience that's senior to all of that. And that is whole and perfect as God himself is whole and perfect. And the way Jesus talks about it in the Course is, you know, the idea of giving up the idea of being right as a necessity, so you can begin to loosen up and then discover that your experience, no matter how you've held on to it or used it or manipulated it, doesn't make you special. You're not special. The ego would have you be special, but that kind of specialization is limiting, and limitation is uncomfortable. It's the root of all suffering. The idea that I'm limited, that I don't have free will. the idea that is suggested by the illusion of limitation. See, in the mind of God, there are no limitations. There are no limits. And therein lies your peace. You're whole and perfect as God is whole and perfect. And all the circumstance and the situational difficulty of your life is what you've made of it. But how? I'm not aware that I made it. Well, it'd be through unconscious thought. And all unconscious thought is the decision not to be conscious. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know what's running my life. I want to go to the refrigerator and go get a beer. I want to go eat something. I want to get on my cell phone and, you know, I want to go have sex. I want to go, you know, go complain with my homies about my job or, you know, my contractor or the fact that my apartment is still not really a home.
I mean, it's interesting because the world is what we think is causing our problems, and the world is also where we go to see if we can solve those problems.
Oh yeah.
So we have
it's a no-win situation.
You know, like if I'm having problems with somebody, well, I'll have a drink. You know, or, I mean, I don't, but you know, it's like that.
I go right
so
back
I'll go to the
the source of everything that I bitterly complain about. I go get more of it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's the solution. That's the way we solve our problems. We go do it again, or we get more of it. We want more of it.
Yeah.
And the illusion of less of it is the same thing.
I mean, just being willing to say, well, maybe it's me, right there. I mean, that could change someone's life right there. I mean, just that simple statement. Maybe it's me that's the issue here. You know, maybe it's my process.
Well, it's my thoughts about me.
Yeah, I don't mean me like.
Yeah.
I mean this.
Because I have to have a foundation, a principle to escape my own thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I have to understand that what I am and who I am is beyond the thoughts I'm having.
Yeah.
Beyond the feelings that are associated with those thoughts. I have to understand that the love of God is everything that I am. The love of God is everything that I am. As a means to directly associate, reconnect, be reminded of my reality, which is beyond all conditions.
That's interesting too, that the thoughts are like the world, in that, well, if I'm having a good thought, I feel good. If I'm having bad thoughts, I feel bad. Well, let me change my good thoughts let me change my bad thoughts into good thoughts. Let me find ways to change my bad thoughts into good thoughts. I'll use the world as a way to change my bad thoughts into good thoughts. I'll do something that's fun for me that day or whatever. But it's all the same. It's all the same game. I mean, ultimately, you're still caught in the world, whether it's thoughts or activities in the world, or
only the thoughts I share with God have meaning,
which is beyond all of that.
Which is totally abstract. I don't have a clue what that is, but I can learn of that. I can discover that, not necessarily intellectually or conceptually, but experientially, through the process of relaxing, through the process of remembering, through the process of going beyond the thoughts I think, the feelings I think I feel. Being willing to venture out beyond the neighborhood, the locality that I think myself to be in. I have to be willing to recognize that I'm not in a location. I have no location. I am an infinite expression of infinite being. I'm everywhere always. If God is the all in all, if God is everywhere always, how could I not be everywhere always along with him? See, I need that understanding, which is not understandable at all within human reasoning, because it violates every principle that a human being associates himself with. but that's why it works. You need a thought from outside the jurisdiction, from outside the reasoning that you're employing in order to experience what you are and who you are. See, there is no world. There's no world like the world I think I'm in. There's no apartment like this apartment that I think I'm in. There's no cat like this cat that I think is Gus. There's no other like the Kevin I'm imagining. Now there is the boundless, beautiful expression of godliness in the expression of another, and only that is what you are and who you are. And my function and responsibility as a rememberer, as a teacher, as a healer, is to remember that unalterable, irrevocable reality that remains safe in God now and forever. So that I can share an experience that honors who you really are, not what you thought or seemed to think. And therein lies the miracle, the miraculous opportunity to get outside of the realm of reasonable. You can't work it out from inside the logic and the reasoning that you have a problem. You have to start with the idea. You have to be willing to accept the idea that maybe the whole idea that I have a problem is the problem. Maybe I don't have a problem. And that is reality. And that's essentially the entire teaching of the Course. God created you. Your nightmare is your own version of your life. It's not your life. Jesus says, that life you think yourself to be living is not that. He says that mess you call your life, is not your life. That mess you call your life is not your life. It's your story. It's your argument. It's what keeps you out of awareness or from being aware of the magnificence and majesty of God's work in you. The reality of who you are as a loving, intelligent expression of His creation. There are no words for that, for how rich your life is. There are no words for how beautiful your life is, your reality is. The good news is that words are not necessary. You don't need a new concept to discover that. You need only be willing to venture beyond the thoughts you think, that you take for granted, that you consider or that seem to be real. They are not real. You need only be honest and sincere. Honest in recognizing that what I think is only what I think. The feelings associated with my thoughts are only the feelings associated with the thoughts that I imagine. They are not my reality. And then the sincerity, the honesty and the sincerity to go beyond them. To be clear that I'm not going to settle for that. I can't fix that. I can't work within the parameters of my dreaming and experience being awake. But I can be awake, and then the circumstance of my dreaming will begin to reflect that. That's what I meant when I said that just becoming aware is the first step in unraveling the mystery of all that discomfort and all that tension and all that conflict that really is nowhere to be found. Right? Because there is no tension because God did not create tension. There is no conflict because God did not create conflict. There is no battlefields in war because God did not create war. There is no death because God did not create death. And therefore, it's unreal. So the whole thing goes up in smoke if you would allow it to. But you can't hold on to any of it. Right? You can't cling to any remnant or scrap of it because the entirety of that dream, of that delusion, is in your clinging to any and all parts of it. You want to know who you are? Then give up all the thoughts that you have about who you are. Be willing to go beyond that. Go out of your house with the sole purpose of discovering who I am. Letting go of the idea that is that I've long maintained about who I am. And then celebrating and being grateful for the fact that there are others who reflect that infinite learning opportunity. I learn of myself as I engage with the other, because the other is an extension of myself. There are no others. There's only one of us. There's only singular self, one self. We are one self united in God. Now, if you notice, at times in conversations like this, your mind will may attempt to labor to reassert certain aspects of your thinking and your feeling and your memory associations, because there is a long overdeveloped tendency to associate safety with those features of your life. But you're learning that there's no safety in maintaining those associations. There's only safety in letting go. Recovering that deep, inexplicable sense of all rightness as a constant ground of being to engage, share, maneuver about for as long as this three-dimensional holographic projection seems to be, so that the encounter becomes consistently the same, unboundless, a pure experience of I don't know. And from that, all that apparent tension and defensiveness and fearfulness goes away. Because it doesn't really exist and everybody knows it. But they need you to remember it and to express that principle, which is really a principle of stillness, before I think another thought, before I feel another feeling, before I say another word. To bring forth, to allow that spirit of infinite presence, perfect peace, infinite safety, to be the ground of being that I engage. And then you can have some fun with anyone, no matter what they say or like or don't like. Whether you like them or don't like them, you can actually start laughing and having a pleasurable experience that's unconditional, which means that it doesn't matter what they do. Mm-hmm. They like my music, they don't like my music. I like my music, I don't like my music. What difference does it make? 7:59. Okay, so good. We're just coming up on an hour. It's pretty good. Mm-hmm. Is this understandable? You understand? Does it make sense?
Sure.
On a very simple, hopefully engaging, enlivening way? I mean, does it afford you some sense of promise and greater possibility that you can maneuver ahead from? Right? Because this is where that's happening. Everything I need to know is always right here. And if I permit the knowledge of it to enter into my thinking, to present itself, to give evidence to itself, then whatever happens will extend that, will reflect that. It'll be okay. If you really look at what the missing quality and the missing ingredient in our relationships and in the world and in the dynamics of our human experience is we're always arguing the case of it's not okay. Mm-hmm. It's not okay for me to be the way I think I am. But it is okay. Nothing is okay. But it is okay. Just the way it is.
We're accustomed to this way of thinking, judging everything and everyone.
Into oblivion. It just kills it. It's the death spiral. Overthinking everything. Our thinking, referring to things from an egotistical reference, as if the ego's imposing, dictating limitations, restrictions, dislikes is the way it really is. Mm-hmm. Nothing is that way.
That thinking and knowledge, human thinking and human knowledge, it gives the life a certain kind of consistency. I think that's part of the problem, is we think of our thinking and our knowledge as us, because, well,
and
when I'm in a deep sleep, there's no thinking and there's no knowledge, and I'm not there. So when I wake up, I'm thinking, I know certain things, I know how to do certain things, I'm back. But in fact...
So it seems.
But
I really haven't woken up.
Yeah, but over time, my knowledge changes, my thinking changes, so how real is that?
Well, look, how useful and practical is my thinking if my thinking leads to no happiness?
Right.
Leads to stiffness and a general and ongoing sense of loss and pain and hopelessness. Where is the practicality? Where is the practicality in that thought? Where's the utility in it? There is not. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say we're addicted to consistency, though. We like.
Although it isn't really consistency.
Well, we like thinking. We think.
Yeah.
That it's consistent. It's safe.
Yeah. It's close enough.
Safe.
Our minds, the mind that thinks itself to be here, that thinks itself to be in control, that thinks itself to exist and be real, says it's good enough for you. It's good enough for you.
At least it's.
After all, who do you think you are, and why would you think it's going to get any better?
Yeah. At least there's no surprises.
And you deserve better.
And that's the corruptedness of guilt, the corruption of guilt, that you would settle for such a pathetic, despairing story, when all the while God knows you as loving and lovable, whole and perfect as He created you, as He Himself is.
Yeah.
But that cannot be known from the dynamics of an illusory thought system whose sole function and purpose is to distract, deny, ignore, temporarily exist. But it's important to recognize it's all helter-skelter. There's no consistency in that. To that mind, everything is this way until it says it isn't.
Exactly.
Yeah. Everything is the same, except when it isn't. So that mind is making exceptions all the time according to its own spurious and deceptive interests. Spurious and deceptive interests. Its sole function is to distract, to deter, to promote existence, the illusion of existence, for just one more moment until you wake up, which is inevitable. And that aspect of mind is really what the fear and the dread is coming from. It knows its own impermanence, its own illusory nature. It knows it doesn't exist. Therefore, what kind of experience could it possibly produce and offer you other than the effect of unreality, which would be contrary and counter to all of the security, the safety, the sense of comfort and belonging and infinite constancy that God offers you. So you have to become unwilling to bind yourself to those thoughts and those influences because they're costly for as long as you believe in them. Now, you're also perfectly capable of having that thought, but not believing it. Right? We often talk about you're perfectly capable of feeling anger, but not being angry. You're perfectly capable of thinking depressing thoughts and even feeling feelings that you associate with fear and anxiety and depression, but choosing not to be depressed. Because your nature could never be depressed. How do I know that? Because God did not create depression or any reason that could lead or thought that could even lead to depression. None of that really exists. God created love, which is what you are and who you are. Everything else is your own nightmare. You can accept that and be grateful for that and practice that principle consistently from here on out, and that will totally turn your time-space experience inside out and enrich it and nourish it in ways you could never imagine, and ways that you could never accomplish for yourself. Because that's what spirit can do. That's what God not only can do, has done. You're just being a little stingy with your life energy, with your truth, with your reality. As long as you maintain an egotistical misidentification, you will deprive yourself. Because the idea of a separate self, of an ego self, has no mercy to offer you. Being an idea that's totally unreal. It has no reality to offer you. Only love is real. Only perfect happiness is real. And your ego can't offer you that, no matter what it says, or promises, or attempts to seduce you with. You just have to become clear that I don't want any of it. Only the thoughts I share with God are of interest to me, have reality, appeal.
So the idea becomes then to learn these thoughts that we have, the same thoughts that God thinks.
Say that again?
Then the idea becomes to learn more about these thoughts that God thinks.
God's thought.
Yeah, God's thought.
Yeah, absolutely. To begin to direct the mind, hold the mind open to the principle of God communication, Holy Communion, which is natural communication. You don't have to develop that, you already have it. But your ego can only distract you from that, and in any way possible, attempt to conceal the fact, the underlying fact, the indwelling fact that Holy Communion is your fundamental communication with God, which you can never lose. So you learn how to be aware of thoughts without being bound to those thoughts, without feeling as if those thoughts are true. They're just thoughts. They're not true or false. Human thought, even at its loftiest, is still just a thought. The thought you share with God is literally, that's the humdinger. That's what you want, you know. The thought I share with God is all I want to know. And that's an experience. That's an experience. It's not about words. It's not about a concept, symbols. It's, I will be still and go home. I will be still for an instant and go home. Be at home. Be one with the Father whose love created me whole and perfect. I will be still in this, right? I often use the idea in the text messages that I send out about, and before you think another thought. Because that moment of truth, that moment of holy instant is always here. You never can lose it, but you can lose sight of it. You can lose awareness of it. And you will lose awareness of it if you allow your worldly mind to run the show. You forget that you have a mind that God shares with you, in which is all the beauty, all the richness, all the meaning, all the freedom, all the joy, all the hope that I could ever want or long for, already fulfilled, already accomplished, already given me, already and always, now and forever, as the singular senior influence. And all that means is learning to always be in communication with Holy Spirit, listening to God's voice, as opposed to what I think, out of which springs hope eternal, aliveness, excitement, light, meaning, value, oh my Godness, as a felt experience that affords me the ability to be myself, to be at peace, to rest in the peace He shares with me. Even while I seem to be in one of these, and seem to walk in a world like this, and seem to have issues, and, right? None of that really matters, because none of it is real. So reality comes when and as I am willing to let go of unreality. And we often refer to that or talk about that as the idea of admitting that I don't know. I don't know what anything is. I don't know what that red light is. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. I don't know. I don't know what that is. As a ground of being out of which I can recover my sense of who I am, the infinite knowledge of being in God, and allow it to express itself while I go in the kitchen, or while I, do this or that or the other thing, while I'm at work, or on the telephone, or looking at my iPhone and eating dinner, so that the dinner isn't a distraction, so that the iPhone isn't a distraction. It has the potential to serve some utility, some usefulness. It's a whole other way. But that way is what and who you are. That's the truth that God gave you in your creation. It's not a thing. It's not a concept. It's not a story. It's not an explanation. It's a living, vital experience of wonderment, of unimaginable beingness. And all of that is what you are, and only that, which is fundamentally the nature of all things that I think I see. All things are really aspects of singular creation, all things, all energies. And that essentially allows whatever seems to be going on to go on, and allows you to address it from a beyond it perspective, where you can actually reintroduce the goodness that's been forgotten that led to the illusion of a problem, a conflict, an argument, a misunderstanding, a sadness, a misspoken word, a mistake. How would I know what a mistake is? You know, like when I play or something, you know, how many times I used to just stop myself and punish myself because, oh, I wasn't right. Now I just play. Mm-hmm. And my playing, I don't want to admit, but I have to admit that my playing seems to be at its best when I'm just not concerned about whether I made a mistake or not. When I admit, as I go, that I really have no reason to call that a mistake because I don't know if it's a mistake or not. It might be the best thing I ever played. As a enriching experience in which I'm being reintroduced to a possibility completely beyond what I think is good or bad. And how else can that true identity, can the self you are that God created present itself to you? But through your willingness, the little willingness you offer Holy Spirit. Well, Holy Spirit is your Holy Spirit. That little willingness becomes the opening, the aperture, out of which Holy Self can say hello. Happy to be with you, you know. Thank you for letting me join you for a moment. As this higher indwelling God-created self, Holy Spirit self, can begin to present you with better versions of worldly thinking, all leading to that moment beyond worldly thought entirely. Right? Holy Spirit might say, well, you know, let's look at it let's look at it a little differently. Maybe it isn't that way. Maybe she isn't that way. Maybe he isn't that way. Maybe I'm not that way. Am I willing to see this a little differently?